Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Cinco de Siete, or whatever, whatever the 7th of May is. I'm here with Courtney Wood of Raymond James. Morning, Courtney.
Good morning.
And what I wanted to talk about today was small business owners and their retirement planning or lack thereof. So, a general problem I come across when I'm meeting small business owners of all sizes, whether it's a $3-5 million transaction or a Main Street transaction, $50,000 pizza parlor or $150,000 lawn service, is they've done zero planning for retirement. And oftentimes, particularly now with the baby boomers, where we're coming across folks, they've, they're in their 60s and 70s, they've got health problems, and they got to sell, and they're faced with a real dilemma of, I've done no saving. And which prompted a lot of questions into me because I save religiously, and it baffles me the panic we're seeing with people today where they have 1 month saving. So I thought it'd be appropriate to get you on and talk about the vehicles they have, your approach to helping small business owners kind of save and go for there. So with that, I'm going to kind of let you take the floor, give a quick background on yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Well, obviously, I'm happy to be here. My name is Courtney Wood. I'm a financial advisor for Raymond James. I work for a local practice over in College Park, and we manage about $1 billion in retirement assets. So this is definitely my wheelhouse. We have a lot of small business owner clients and then some just general corporate employees. But the main commonality between almost everybody, whether you're a business owner or you're just an individual, saving for retirement is not easy, and a lot of people get started late. So that is definitely a common trend, and hopefully today I can give you some insight that helps you not be one of those people going forward.
Okay. So let's talk about like the average Joe, right, or Josephine. They've got a business. They're doing $500,000 a year. They're making 150 grand a year, or $100,000 a year, or 75. What are the problems they have with saving? Like, when you encounter them, what are they afraid of? Is it because they don't understand? Is it because they like to have cash reserves, or they think like the stock market's risky? That's what I encounter. It's like they do not understand it, and it's never been explained in layman's terms, or they are afraid of not having access to the funds when they need it. And that's a real small business problem.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes down to not having that first step taken care of, which is having enough cash to cover those basic emergencies. If you had that, you would probably feel more comfortable about investing for a longer time horizon like retirement.
So how
So
do they define that? Like, when you sit down with a customer, how do you go through the math? Like, when I get someone from Europe, right, and they want to know, they tell me they got $200,000 to get into the country to buy a business. I go, you don't. You have 150, because you need at least 3 months worth of living, and I do the backward math on their children, cost of living, rent, gas, and then I buffer it. How do you do it for the average person making? And then I go, we got some assumptions here, but if they're making 75 grand, they have a car payment of 200 grand. Walk me through, how should they calculate their emergency fund?
So the typical definition for emergency fund is 3 to 6 months of non-discretionary expenses. So sometimes that, if you don't have a good like watch on your budget, that can come across like what is that? So I usually tell people 3 to 6 months of whatever their monthly salary looks like, or half a year's salary. But that's for the average Joe. If we're talking from a business owner perspective, I personally feel that number should be closer to 6 to 12 months.
Right.
Most of my business owner clients that I work with personally, they have somewhere between 6 to 12 months, and we continue to build and grow that number just for safety.
Right. And I see the same thing. So at a personal level, you need 3 to 6 months. So that's what I call your nut:
Mhm.
rice, beans, sustain your rent, pay your mortgage, pay your car payment, add up what it costs you to survive every month without going to the movies and restaurants. What's that number? If you own a business, it's like having a second household. So you do
Right.
that same exercise for the household. And that's why you kind of doubled it, right?
Right. But you could also look at the business specific expenses. So it's not just your personal household doubled, it's your personal household and then whatever the business household would look like. So
Right.
I think it's important to have I personally, my own goal for myself as a business owner is to have at least 12 months of cash on hand.
Right.
I think it puts you in a good position.
So like in a COVID circumstance, right, where everything goes for 2 months now, everything's in a shutdown, right? If you don't have, a year's worth of reserves, you've been operating on net 30 cash flow and you've got a lot of debt, you're in deep, deep, doo-doo. And, I get two schools of thought. So most business owners don't carry those reserves because they live beyond their means. You see the guy who owns the lawn company pulls up in an F-350 and he's got a jet ski and a boat and he's got a mortgage because he can afford it. Yet when a crisis happens like this and things shut, and by the way, this stuff happens. Like
Yep.
historically, every 10, 12 years, the world turns upside down. There's wars, there's pestilence. It's like the act of God. I'm waiting for the frogs and the locusts to appear. But every 10 years, there's some type of financial hiccup and people aren't prepared. So, you got to have that savings. Dave Ramsey calls it that emergency fund. You call it an emergency fund. It's not rocket science. You just got to have reserves, and then it's reserves. You got to have reserves, and it's got to be super, super healthy.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so what? From a business owner standpoint, the challenge then becomes, particularly the smaller businesses that don't have banking relationships. So it might be interesting if what business owners do is they borrow and they don't want to pay taxes. So if they don't pay taxes, the rates at which they borrow tend to be higher because their reported income tends to be lower. And then they get into these high interest rates. And when these crises happen, it's a snowball and they point the finger at everybody. When it's kind of like, look, if you had cash and you were more slow in your growth pattern, then when these hiccups happen, you wouldn't be caught. And then you'd have reserves and you could actually be in a better position when the world turns upside down than, chasing the growth curve and leveraging yourself into it. And that kind of, on a personal level, we see that with houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they leverage up to buy a house because their mortgage broker says they can afford it. And they're keeping up with the Joneses and they've got a 6-bedroom house and they use 2 rooms, right? And they have no furniture, right?
Yep.
So 12 months, 6 to 12 months of savings, they got cash. Then what do they do?
Well, then they have this safety behind them to start pivoting. So maybe they look to start saving for retirement. And that doesn't have to be some big scary thing where you have to save 20 grand this year for retirement to be successful. When it comes to saving for retirement, there's really 2 things that make you successful. You either have to have a lot of time or a lot of money. If you have neither, you started late, but you're not dead. So we can still make something happen.
So talk to me about this time or money thing, right? Because entrepreneurs are A-type personalities generally, and they're always racing, and they always think like they don't have time. They're in a hurry to be successful. So part of that's our culture that says, you got to have the biggest house, you got to have the biggest car, you got to have and I just had a conversation with someone last night where all they talked about was their revenue growth. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Revenue growth's, gotta love the lawn guy just showed up. I'm on my porch.
Oh, I can't even hear it. I must.
The revenue really doesn't matter, right? And so talk to me about that time and talk to me about the money thing and how that relates to individual investors and small business.
So I can totally relate to the A-type business owner personality because that is my essence. I do a really good job of masking it with a funny personality, but I really am A-type. So I'm constantly thinking about my own revenue growth and am I where I want to be? Am I meeting those targets and those goals that I set up arbitrarily in my head? So business owners need to tone that down when it comes to retirement. It's great to have a sense of urgency, but most retirement accounts, you can't access the money until you're 59 and a half. So wherever you are today until 59 and a half, that could be a very long time horizon for someone like me who's on the younger side. That could be a shorter time horizon for someone who's older, and hopefully you're not 58 today, right now during this talk. But if you're somewhere in the middle, even if you're in your 40s, that's almost 20 years. So almost everybody has a lot of time. A lot of money part comes in if you are literally in your late 50s and you're trying to retire at 60. You better have 300, 400 grand ready to go now because you're going to need that type of nest egg in the future for retirement, at least that much. So a lot of time, if you're anywhere between the age of 20 and I'd say 50, because you could still retire at 65 and have a great retirement. I'd say anywhere between the age of 20 and 50, you have plenty of time. If you're over the age of 50, we might want to start looking at hustling a little bit when it comes to the retirement part of this. But also for business owners, a lot of them in their minds are thinking, well, I'm going to sell my business. I can rely on that business to, what's the word I'm looking for? Fund my retirement. But that's not always the case. And like with COVID-19, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's good to be in touch with someone like you, Mike, who can help them evaluate that business as they plan for their retirement too, and make that more of a definite cash flow situation.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's a common one. I'll sell my business for X, right? But then you got to reconcile it. If they don't prepare that business for sale, I just did an exercise with someone in Houston where they were asking me about his brother selling his business, and he wanted to know what the business was valued if it did $3 million. And I said, it's the wrong answer. What is it producing in cash flow? What can I prove? What does the market say? So unlike the stock market where it's a little bit more defined, businesses are investments, but you can drive the value up or drive it down based upon how you prepare the finance. You have to prepare for the exit. So if you do not prepare, I won't max the dollar, and then that nest egg for you to go to work with is lower. And then they also forget that there's supply and demand. 6 months ago, a business was worth $3 million. A restaurant that was worth $3 million right now, I can't move, and it happens that fast. So you have to have your portion of the puzzle, your portion of the balance sheet, prepared and ready, because the business value is a variable. And it always baffles me. The other thing I want to talk about with you is people don't understand the difference between having money and wealth, right? And I often joke with people, my kids, I have younger kids, and they look at the big house neighborhood. I own my house, right? But I've been in the same house for 20 years. Same house when I made 80 grand is the same house I have now. Nothing's changed. I drive a used car, right? And my kids look at the rich neighborhood and they wonder why they can't pay their mortgages, the 7-bedroom homes. And I go, the guy who has that house probably has a crap load of debt. He doesn't have any net worth, right? He's not wealthy. Meanwhile, my 90-year-old father, who lives down the street and wears sweatpants and a t-shirt, he's a multimillionaire.
Yep.
But he was born in the Depression. And he saved and saved and saved and saved and lived frugally. The value of the dollar, he used to talk. And he has one of these phrases. He's got a lot of them, but he has one that says, you live to feed the beast you create, or you work to feed the beast you create, meaning don't have debt, because if you have debt, that's what you're going to have to spend money on, right?
Yep.
And to pay. It's not going in your pocket creating wealth. It's going to pay the banker, right?
Yeah.
Give me a little bit on wealth versus money.
So I think wealth is really an individual definition. You can have someone who makes 45 grand a year in some corporate job somewhere, and they could consider themselves wealthy because they feel financially safe. I think wealth is less important than actually feeling financially secure or financially safe, or having that financial peace of mind. So you could be a young lawyer coming right out of school making whatever they make nowadays. I don't really know the number, but I'm sure it's high or low. I have no idea. Maybe not a first-year lawyer, but like a 5-year lawyer, somewhere in there. They're probably starting to come up on their game and starting to see that growth in their income. But they're trying to compete with their partners and buddies who maybe have 5 to 10 years more experience than them and are at a different point in life. So they start leveraging themselves and taking on too much debt. And if you're held back by the amount of debt you have to the point where you don't have any extra savings, you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck because your entire paycheck's going to debt, you're not wealthy. You don't even have money at that point. You have a bunch of money that you borrowed and now are having to pay back. So I think that the wealth conversation comes down to, are you happy with your finances? I can't define that for you. I can't say to you at a net worth of $250,000, you should be wealthy and happy. That really comes down to an individual level. So it's all personal based, but I think that obviously it's way more important to be financially secure than to feel like you look like you have a lot of money.
Well, that's that's like, one takeaway for everybody is stop keeping up with the Joneses. You
Mm-hmm.
got to understand that debt, the person who drives the Jag. I mean, that always fascinates me when I go in and I do an analysis and I go through their books and I go, you're making no money. But I did 8 million in revenue. I'm like, yeah, but and I have I'm telling buyers now, I go, business owners are selling now because they have debt, right? The business is fine. It's their debt. The debt's the weight that burdens them down and doesn't allow them to create well, do all this work and make no money. $1 million in revenue with no profit because you're paying the bank the $1 million
Yep.
makes no sense. It doesn't
No.
actually help you. The reason you're in business is to make money and become wealthy so that you can retire. And that takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. And so, everyone needs to slow the hell down. Realize you're going to live to about like 90, right? You're living a lot longer. Like the 59, 60 thing, that matrix was built when people lived to be 65. People lived to be 80, 90. Like everybody in my office is in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Right? 50's young, right?
Yep.
Hey. So everyone's in a hurry, or the paradigm of wealth and how long you have. It's like everyone needs to slow the hell down and get a little bit more patient. And the business owners need to leverage $100 here, $10 here. Stop buying, the bar tab every Friday. Take that $50 and put it into, a vehicle that makes them money, and recognize that's wealth, right? So let's talk about that. What are the vehicles that business owners can use to kind of get wealthy? So let's talk about that. The business owner, he's making 100 grand in his pocket, the cash flow, but they can live on 60, right? What should they be doing? Where should they be putting money?
So the easiest way to figure out where you should be throwing your money in terms of retirement accounts is really to start with how much you can save. So I like that you framed it that way, because that's exactly what I say to clients. A lot of the business owners that I work with, if I'm the first financial advisor they've ever worked with, they get hung up on the sexiness of all these accounts that they hear their buddies talking about. Like, oh, I need a SEP, I need a simple, I need a 401k, I need a mutual bond. By the way, a mutual bond is not a thing. It's just people mixing up all the terms, Right.
So, by the way, they're all lying.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So first off, don't believe your friends. None of them are in the market. Don't listen to the static. You hire a professional who can break it. And by the way, don't be intimidated by the terms. You want to partner with a financial planner who breaks it down. I tell mine, right? I go, hey, I'm stupid. I pay you to be smart. You tell me this. And conversely, when he wants to know how to sell businesses, he'll ask me, break it down so I understand it, because we operate in different worlds. We don't all have to be experts in our industries. The key is that you trust the people you work with.
Yeah. And I think we're getting off on a tangent, but this is good. I think business owners tend to feel like they have to be an expert in everything because they had to be an expert in every single aspect of their business when it first started. So they get hung up on that. I got to keep it close to home. I got to know how it works. I got to be in charge of it. When at some point you're way better off switching to professional help. Like, you don't do your own taxes. You don't take your own blood pressure. You don't diagnose your own heart medicine, birth control, whatever it is. Why would you think you should also control your own nest egg and your own savings for retirement? It's my job. So, obviously I feel passionate about professional help in my industry, but I think it's so needed because mostly what I think we provide is taking that emotional bias out of it. People in the investment world are driven by fear. They do a bunch of research because they're afraid of what they don't know. They do a bunch of research because they're afraid they're going to pick the wrong investment or the wrong investment vehicle. That fear can be eliminated if you work with a professional or a team like my team who has all these processes in place to take out that emotion and that fear and that unknown. We try to take all the variables that could change and build a little bit of certainty in that based on, having a lot of time, having diversification, et cetera, et cetera.
I had a client about 3 months ago when this all started, and he called me. Now, I've known him for 12 years. And he's like, what vehicle do you think I should be in? I'm like, I'm not that person. But the reason he was calling me, he's like, well, aren't all finance people? It's like, you don't go to an anesthesiologist for brain surgery, right? I can read a balance sheet, I can read a financial statement, but I don't spend my day in your world watching the markets. Right. So like when the market tipped, I got an email from my planner, hey, I need to schedule an appointment, and he gets on the phone and he's like, do you need to talk? Do you want to talk? I'm like, no, I'm cool. I know where we were last time we talked. I knew we're going to be down. I don't generally care because I
Mhm.
got time, and I knew that our plans were in effect. And I'm like, I know this is going to rise, and I'm like, hey, but Disney's down. Can I buy some Disney stock? So I grabbed some Disney stock because I know damn well that's going back, right? And
Yep.
and it's like, so everyone needs to calm down. And the key is get educated, find people you trust, who you can actually talk to regularly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell people, if you can't picture yourself having a drink with me, if you don't drink, having a water with me or appetizers or whatever, if you can't picture that type of relationship with me, then I'm probably not the advisor for you, because I want us to get to know each other on that simple, unsexy level. I'm not here to talk over you. I'm not here to preach my knowledge. I'm literally just here to try to make this process as simple as possible for you so that you have a successful future.
Right. And you get what they want, right?
Mhm.
So it's one of those first steps is, okay, what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah,
Right?
that's literally where we start. If
You
if
want to
you
pay for college. Yeah.
yeah, if you tell me how much you can save now, where you want to be 40 years from now when you sell the business or retire, that helps me figure out what we need to do today. And at that point, it's simple. I mean, there's a lot of complexities with some of these plans, like the 401k, the simple IRA, the SEP. They all have their own little complexities to them. But if you tell me how much you can save today, you tell me where you want to be in the future, we can figure it out. It's not hard, it's not rocket science. It just takes discipline, and it takes a little bit of, you know, grittiness or, fearlessness, because obviously we're going to have ups and downs. That's how you grow. That's how anybody grows, even personally. You have to go through some negatives or some downturns to achieve that growth you're looking for.
Yeah. And they also gotta, but I think when you sit down with them, you're going to look at where's all your spent, like, hey, I make $100,000 a year. Then you look at their bank account, you're probably having that come to Jesus meeting going, where'd the money go?
Yeah.
Like
And
if you
it's
have
really simple. I can
discipline,
tell you where it goes. Right now it's going to Amazon because everybody shops online and they're not tracking what they're spending on there, and it goes to food. Literally so many people eat out, and it, like you say, even in my own industry, I see the younger advisors going to lunch every day. That's 10, 15, $18 depending on where you're going when you get out the door, tip and everything. Why are you spending $18 a day on lunch when you're out there hunting for clients and hunting for business?
right? Yeah.
Why are you going out to dinner every night and spending $500 a week at the grocery store? You're not eating all that food. Like, how many times do you throw out like a brand new thing of organic berries from Fresh Market because someone told you that that was like hip and made you seem healthier? You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, it is um, that exercise. And that's one of the things business owners need to go through their bank statement, and that's uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And sometimes you find that, particularly in couples, um, I'm sure you find it in your world versus my world. Like I have to sit with the couple and go, because I don't want them fighting with each other. If they're going to fight, let them fight with me because I'm objective. I'm
Hmm.
not. I'm not. I'm not invested in the pain, but I can objectively look at it and go, you didn't need to spend that money on X and that trip to Cabo. And why are you driving a 5 Series? Because you want to look, because you can afford it. Okay, well that's fine. It's your choice, but it's inconsistent with what you want to achieve. So you want to be wealthy, or do you want to look good to your friends now? And there's some psychology to that. So like, why are people going to restaurants? Because it's easy. It's laziness. And becoming wealthy let me get a little political here. Wealthy people don't get to give it to them. They work for it. And sometimes it's how much money you're spending. It's that old adage of the beast you create.
Hmm.
My old man used to, this is really sad, but as a doctor, he would take me as a little boy. This is still in my head. He had me dumpster dive for day old bread. Because
Wow.
now, that's an extreme. Town doctor doing that. But he's sitting down the street. He retired at 55, and he's Cretius down there. He's loaded, and he doesn't have a stress. And when you're 90 and you have health care and you can afford to have 24-hour help, I, as a caretaker, I'm so thankful for that.
Hmm.
So Was it traumatic as a 7-year-old being thrown in a dumpster? I don't know, because I've drawn the conclusion that, like, okay, the message was don't spend money. We always drove a used car. We belonged to a country club, but we'd roll up in a 76 station wagon, like something vacation or something. It was bad. But he's loaded. And I always tell my mother, I go, you have no worries. Conversely, there are 60, 70, 80-year-old people who are still working because they didn't save a dime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever your choice, live with it.
Yeah.
But don't cry, for me, Argentina, when you're broke and you did it to yourself.
Yeah.
So where should people start, right? What are the things that guy walks in and he makes 100, he can live on 75, and he's got one kid. He could probably save 20 grand a year, right? Where would you put that stuff to work? I mean, again, assumptions, but how would you start approaching that?
So I think people, when they first sit down with advisors, they tend to overinflate themselves or make themselves sound maybe a little bit better than they are, because they feel intimidated and they feel like I'm a doctor asking their weight, which no one likes being asked that question. We always say 5 pounds less. You're going to say, oh, I can save 20 grand this year, Courtney. Like, here you go. But the reality is it's not going to happen that way. 6 months from now, you're probably going to say, oh, this is too much on a monthly basis. We had this come up. The kid had this happen. He wants to play T-ball now, whatever it is.
Right.
20 grand. If you start with 20 grand, most people are not going to get there because it sounds too high. And if we start actually filling out paperwork and setting up bank auto drafts, then it becomes, well, I thought 500 a month sounded great, but now, 250 feels more comfortable. And then I might add on later towards the end of the year on a quarterly basis, however, all the things people say because they're afraid.
No, I went through that. My wife, because my wife came from a farm, and farms are very cash flow erratic. So she always had to have like 30 grand in reserves. And I'm like, could you please put that somewhere? We can actually access it. But she needed to have that cash. And now she's got more educated on the markets and how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I sitting on cash? Let me put it into a vehicle.
But at the same time, you want to make sure you're sitting on enough cash to cover that emergency fund so that you can feel comfortable with your investments.
And you'll help them do that math though, right?
Yeah. I think the more, cash you have, the easier investing becomes, whatever. We already touched on that. But so basically what I'm saying to you is, if someone said, I'm going to save 15 grand this year, me and my wife or me and my husband or whoever can save 15 grand this year, I'm going to start with an IRA or a Roth IRA. Now there's income limits, there's, tax issues, whatever. And that's all on an individual basis, but most of the country qualifies to make either a Roth or an IRA contribution. If you're under the age of 50, you can do 6 grand. If you're over the age of 50, you can do 7 grand with that $1,000 catch-up contribution. Let's do one for you, max that out, do one for your spouse, max that out. And if at the end of the year, we still can save more, then we pivot.
Right. And then inside those Roths are different vehicles, right? So
Yeah.
mutual funds, or you may buy Pepsi, or you can buy different stuff within the Roth.
Yeah.
The Roth is the tax structure and how the taxes are recognized by the feds.
So I think a good way to describe this, and the way that I explain it, is like with drinks. So you can put your water that you take to work in a Yeti. You can put your water you take to work in a Zephyr Hills water bottle. You can put it in a coffee cup if you're a little weird, drinking water out of a coffee cup. But the thing is, like, the cup can change. So whatever you hold a liquid in can change. And then what doesn't really change is the investment opportunities you have. So you can put water in each one of those cups. It doesn't matter what cup you had. So the account is the cup. So you can have an IRA, you can have a Roth, you can have a SEP, you can have a 401k, you can have a non-retirement account. You can still invest in that water in all those accounts.
Okay. So 5 years go by and those people their business has grown and they've maintained their living style. They haven't bought the bigger house. They haven't upgraded. Then what do we start doing?
So first, if they can do that, I think that is the number one way to be successful. And I keep trying to explain this to like younger people. If you could figure out how to live on whatever your base is right now, and continue that for your life, that gives you so much power. It goes back to what you said about the beast. If you can maintain that beast and keep that beast small, as your income goes up, you have so much more spending power, whether that's investing or that's buying another company or diversifying this way or saving for your kids' college or something. Like that gives you so much power. So if they did that for 5 years, like kudos to them, because it's easy to get caught up. You think you're being more successful, so now I got to look better, I got to buy a new car or whatever. It's so easy to fall into that. But if you can control that behavior, kudos to you. So at that point, it really comes down to the structure of the company. That's going to be a big key here, because all of the different retirement vehicles have different complexities and rules and situations based on how you're structured. So if you're a sole proprietorship, you got no employees, then maybe the SEP's the next best option, because SEPs are simple. It's a SEP IRA. It works the same as a traditional IRA. Money goes in pre-tax. You get a tax deduction. You're able to contribute up to 25% of your compensation, income, profit, up to a total of $57,000. So that's great. The downside of that is if you have 10 employees, you have to also make the same contribution for them. So let's say you do a 10% contribution for yourself as the business owner, you then have to do the same thing for each one of your full-time employees that qualifies. So it might,
but only if they opt into it, right?
not with the SEP.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's they have to qualify in terms of age, hours worked, et cetera. But if you do one for yourself, you have to do one for your full-time employees that qualify under that. So that's something that people maybe aren't aware of. And that's why if they have employees, it's much better to look towards maybe 401k or simple.
Right.
And then also if they're 1099 versus W-2, I mean, there's so many different avenues to take this, which is why it's nice to have someone like me on your side, on your team, helping you make that decision.
Right. And then, so, you know, how they form, and you work with their accountants too, to kind of go, hey, look, this is where they're at. This is where they're going. This is what their employee status is. This is how their corporate status is. You know, what are the vehicles? And then, you know, as you grow your business, they still got to maintain that discipline. If they maintain that base, they maintain their reserves, then the ability to put the money to work is, you know, I literally this morning, because I'm a little slow, right? I'm working, but I was literally like, okay, I got to remember that all the work I did last year is reserves put into work in financial vehicles, which is creating wealth, because, you know, I'm trying to become wealthy and safe and take care of my family. My work may be slow from a transactional basis, but the work I did prior, all those funds are working, right? So it's easy as a business owner because you define yourself by what you're doing every day to get lost in that. But if you get that wealth concept and the long-term goal of developing wealth so you can kind of go chill on the beach in Cabo, then, you know, you're able to kind of keep your nexus point and move forward and be disciplined about what you do. And it's so important to kind of have a financial planner kind of go, look, this is how I help you get there. So
Yeah.
401ks, we've done SEPs. The point is there's different vehicles for different circumstances. You can't possibly, you know, with me giving you, you know, Adam and a stick figure, make an X, draw out the perfect scenario. There are going to be conditions and circumstances that dictate. And as their family life change, like their kids, how do you pay for college? Those are all discussions that you're going to have with them in context of their plan, because you and your team have had the experience to kind of stay level-headed through the crises, right? I imagine you've had a bunch of crazy phone calls during the last month, right? Like people panicking.
Yeah, things got really bad right around the bottom, which was like March 23rd, somewhere around there. But it's not, I don't want to use the word bad. It's because it's not ever bad. It's expected. No matter like how great of a client someone is, how friendly they are, how much they love us, they're going to react out of fear when things like this happen. That's totally normal. And it's our job to help them process those emotions. So most of the questions I got asked over the last, I don't know, what month is it? Like 2 months on lockdown that we are on right now. A lot of the questions have been emotionally driven. People are just responding to a crazy situation emotionally. Like, who wouldn't do that? Male and female. So the questions they ask us, they're not trying to insult us or sound stupid or whatever the word or whatever they're afraid of coming to us for what, like with questions. They're just trying to wrap their brain around what's going on and figure out the best solution, and they need help with that, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way I sometimes describe it is they're in the back of the boat and you're in the bridge and you're steering it, right? You've got all the charts, whistles, engine, you're seeing all the data. They don't know. And there's this, that's why the trust relationship is so important. The ability to have a beer with somebody and, trust them is so important, because your panic when you trust your people around you drops precipitously. You don't fear when things go wrong. So like my mom and dad are older, right? And they're in a different stage of life. And when this started to happen, I made sure I picked up the phone, called their financial planner. I said, look, I need you to give her a phone call, because I know that they're going to panic. They have nothing to panic about, right? Even if the world blew up, they're fine. I mean, they couldn't, 1,000 years, they couldn't spend all their money, right? But it was, you have to be able to get that communication. So the point is, there are firms where business owners and investors can't talk to their advisors. And, there's always that commercial. I don't know if you're old enough to remember this one, that old big banker in the suit and the little guys, you can't connect with your investment advisor because they're too busy, or you're intimidated and you can't talk to them.
Yeah.
You're not those people. It's like you live
No.
in the neighborhood, you live in the community. If they call, you're answering.
Yep.
You're doing Zoom calls. You're having meet and greets with them just to make them feel and be accessible so they know what to do.
Yeah, I called every single one of my clients within, I think, 2 weeks of lockdown starting. Obviously, you only have so much time in the day to get phone calls done like that, but I had pretty much everyone covered within the first 2 weeks. And
That's awesome.
it was great, but it was almost strange, because I kind of expected, oh gosh, they're going to be angry at me, they're going to think this is my fault, whatever the case may be. But I guess I trained them really well to understand that this is just normal business cycle. And also, we have such great relationships that they asked me if I was okay. They're like, I didn't want to bother you because I figured you were getting a bunch of calls and I'm sure that this is hard on you. I'm like, what? I didn't expect that.
You and I had a meeting, and you and I had talked that we had anticipated a hiccup coming.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to be COVID, but we knew a hiccup was coming because the data said, like, there are charts and trends, and you can look at that data and go, we need to adjust. So them not being freaked out is a function of you were leaning forward, feeding them information, and you had adjusted the portfolio so that when the hit came, they took a punch. I think I was off 8%, right? That's nothing. I mean, there are people who were off like 50 because it was fire and forget and they didn't care. And I'm like 8, I'm pretty good with 8, right?
Yep.
I know 2 weeks later, we're continuing the rebound, right? Now we're opening in the market. And the other thing you need to understand, people watch the news and they don't understand what they're seeing.
Nope.
So they're like, oh, the market's down 600. And I get the Facebook post, oh, my portfolio shot, I'll never retire. I'm like, well, if that's your problem, you're a bumbling idiot to begin with. But the market reflects trades. It doesn't reflect individuals' positions in the market. All it's reflecting is the blood in the water that day, that moment, right?
Right. And also a $600 swing in the 90s was a big deal. Now, with as high as the market is, it's a small percentage. We're talking about like a 1%, 2%, any given day, 3% swing. And people don't understand that because they're talking about it in terms of market fell 1,000 points today.
Yeah. So like a younger investor, right, who's only known like plus 20,000 on the Dow, I'm going, dude, I mean, I started when I was 21. That's 30 years ago. It was like 12,000 was a massive number. We were single digits and we were like 8,000, 9,000 on the Dow. And now it's 29. I'm like, I look back and went 5 years ago, I'm way up. I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine. But if your context has been the last 10 years of a rise, this seems like a punch in the face. So I guess the more punches in the face, the more calm you get, right?
Yeah, I guess something like that.
All right. So my kids started to arrive on my deck. I want to thank you for doing this. Give everybody your website, your contact information, how they can get a hold of you.
So you can find me at Invest with Courtney. My website is investwithcourtney.com. I'm on Facebook at Invest with Courtney and also on LinkedIn at Invest with Courtney. If you want to email me, you can also email me. That's courtney.r.wood@raymondjames.com. I know that was a long one.
I'll post it for everybody. I'll put it in the notes. Well, thanks. It looks like you froze up.